I think the issue with foreign aid is that it won't solve the lack of economic development. I mean, the problem in Africa is their incomes are too low. If the crop fails for whatever reason in any year, then suddenly they haven't got any savings, they haven't got any stores, and they're hungry, their sanitation conditions, everything just deteriorates, and that's when, you know, the world has to looks at it and provides aid. But unfortunately, I think the message that's been sold in the West is that Africa's always like that, and there's always those images on the television. And part to blame for that, I think, are the aid agencies themselves. They tend to use that as a marketing ploy to suck money out of the West. Clever to a degree, but I think they've overdone it.
$1 give me, no man.
You want me to give you $1?
$1. $1 one. Give me the man.
One of the things that really struck us pretty early on was people, when you stop, people put their hand out, give me money. Give me money. That's the most common, whereas other places is what's your name, you know. But here it's give me money, and you sort of, what is it about Africa that they do that? Why do they do that? And I think it's just the ubiquity of all the aid agencies here and the handouts. I think the West, or people in the West, are trying to solve Africa's problems through aid. You'll never solve it through aid. Their issue is they've got low incomes, so you need to get their incomes up. And the only way to do that is to allow them to sell their produce in the West for, you know, decent prices, particularly agricultural produce, but they're locked out.
Controversy struck when Gareth's comments made their way back to New Zealand, and World Vision CEO Lisa Sescon took him to task in the New Zealand Herald.
Other countries we've been to are poor as well, and we come through on our big flash, you know, the top of Tibet, you go through that in your big flash motorbike. And what do they do there? They invite you into their, you know, their hut to share their yak tea, which is bloody awful, by the way. And, you know, you swap towels and so on. They never ask for anything. You might give them something, but in Africa it's completely the other way.
Sescon described Gareth's comments in the Herald as, quote, ill-informed and inaccurate observations, completely devoid of respect for the continent he is touring.
Well, the first thing is that she's in the business is sucking as much money out of New Zealand as she possibly can. That's how they run their budgets. They're just corporates, those people. She has a religious agenda as well. All the wrong reasons. Now, they may well do good work, I don't know. But all I'm saying is I've never seen so many churches as we have coming through Africa. They're just edifices that have been built by, you know, Western religious money, and it's just wasted. It's a waste of time.
I think Gareth doesn't like a lot of aid agencies and how they work, and he sees problems in those. I mean, if you really want to change the state of Africa, it has to be done on so many different levels. You have to really lobby the trade regulations that govern this country. You have to give aid, and you have to make sure that aid is sustainable and it's long term. It's not just about coming in here and doing some short-term fixes that you leave the next day and they break down and they won't work. It's about educating a whole nation of children. It's about immunising them so they don't die before their 5th birthday.
Actually, we've gone through some little villages and there'd be sort of 8 or 10 different churches of all different names, some of them you've never heard of. And on their little advertising billboards outside the churches, they've written the services they provide. So it was almost like a competition in some villages, who can get the most people into their flock by offering, you know, AIDS, drugs or food assistance and family relief and vocational training and orphanages.
But the religious organisations in particular here, I think, are quite corrupt. I mean, we came across an instance that was one of the Bible Belt American churches here that had set up a school and for the village, and so the village kids all went to the school, but for the kids who couldn't afford to, the parents who couldn't afford to pay, then the way you could pay off for your child was to make your child go to Bible classes for Saturday and Sunday as well. Well, I just think that that's wrong. People in New Zealand who are religious need to really look twice at what they're actually doing here, what they're actually funding here. And there's a big battle, say in Malawi we saw between the Presbyterians in the different regions fighting each other over who belonged to each congregation, because of course the collection bowl, and these are really poor people we're talking about, the collection bowl was all important in their little empire. It's totally for the wrong reason, that stuff.
Gareth Morgan and Jo, his wife, are our newest ambassadors, and we're just thrilled to have them on board. The thing about Gareth is he's nobody's fool. He's not going to become an ambassador of UNICEF if he has any doubts whatsoever that we are not delivering and we're not the best in the business. Now, he's just announced to us at the end of his trip that he's going to donate $500,000 New Zealand dollars to us, and he also wants the New Zealand public to also match him dollar for dollar, so that we can make sure that the rest of the 50% of this country that don't have clean water, that die early, are going to get clean water.
You know, we're not saying that aid isn't needed here, but you've got to be quite specific as to what you're trying to achieve. And I think UNICEF does it really well for a number of reasons. A, there's no religion. Right, so that's off the agenda. So that secret agenda of theirs is gone. 2, they favour women, and a lot of these countries that really struggle and don't seem to go anywhere is because women are discriminated against.
They sometimes have to walk up to 3.5 hours every day just to fetch water. Now, if you think that a country like Africa is so poor, if half the population of women are spending their days walking for 3 hours down the road, then walking for 3 hours back with a huge bucket of water on their head, that's a huge waste of potential.
The thing that is worrying is when you see the very young girls with incredibly heavy loads and often a sibling strapped to their back, and they're lugging water and things from the well.
And also children are discriminated against, and Africa's obviously got far too many children.
Certainly Christianity can certainly take full responsibility for the population growth in Africa. It was ironic that here we were being part of UNICEF, putting down these wells that Gareth and Jo had donated, and yet on the other side there was the religious factions that were certainly encouraging religion in the tribes and weren't doing a lot about birth control.
So UNICEF, I think, recognises all those things. UNICEF, Red Cross, those sort of agencies, I think they're fantastic. They come in, they do a specific job, and then they sort of withdraw.
And also I think they try and get the communities to participate and to have a bit of a stake in the equation, and they're aiming at sort of sustainable outcomes. Yeah. And that is really important when we're talking about where we want to put money.